These days, fast food chains can cost as much as any other restaurant, except with much lower quality food items. This disappointing change is mostly due to the unstoppable greed of corporations who refuse to make their food reasonable prices. This unpleasant state of things in the fast food industry makes people long for simpler times in restaurants that have since died out. In honor of these fallen fast food joints, we will look at the top 10 best old and discontinued food chains we lost too soon. White Tower Hamburgers. The restaurant White Tower Hamburgers was first founded in the 1920s in Wisconsin. It had an iconic fortress-like look to its buildings that made them easily recognizable, but were often mocked for being a ripoff of the famous White Castle. The resemblance was so strong that White Castle even sued them 3 years after they started the business. The judges would rule in White Castle's favor and force White Tower to change a lot of its designs and marketing. This caused White Tower to adopt a more modern aesthetic. However, painful it was to lose this lawsuit, it did not stop White Tower from leaving its mark on the people. It was well known for its amazing 2 hamburgers for 5 cents deal during the Great Depression, likely feeding tons of hungry people. At its height, it had hundreds of restaurants in the 1950s. However, the decline of this business began in the 1980s when legal battles and urban development changes pushed it out of business. Unfortunately, the last White Tower closed in 2022. ChiChi's. The restaurant with the playful name ChiChi's was a Tex-Mex restaurant that delighted its customers with its Mexican-style flavors and decor. It was named after one of the founder's wives whose nickname was ChiChi. The 80s was when this restaurant took off and expanded at the speed of light. However, this may have proven to be its downfall as it spread the new business thin, and by the late 90s, it struggled to stay open. While people loved getting their first taste of Mexican food and throwing celebrations at this restaurant, by the early 2000s, they would all close down due to a hepatitis scandal. This restaurant went down in flames, with 4 people dying due to this devastating outbreak. Bob's Big Boy. This Southern California restaurant first appeared in the late 1930s as Bob's Pantry, whose biggest draw, the Big Boy Burger, was made with 3 buns and 2 burger patties, a popular way to eat burgers today, but were completely original when Bob Wien introduced them in his restaurant. Bob Wien would manage and expand his burger chain from 1937 to 1967 before selling it to new owners. There are only 5 of these restaurants still running when at its height, it had at least 53. These days, the only thing left of it is the corporation name and protected landmarks in California that still have its iconic branding. Noggles. This Southern California Mexican chain restaurant was first introduced to consumers in 1970. At its height, there were over 200 locations. The founder of this chain was also the co-founder of Del Taco, which is still up and running today. It served all the classic food staples that one can expect from a Mexican restaurant, like tacos, burritos, nachos, and burgers. This restaurant lasted until 1995, before poor management saw it close down. However, in 2019, this chain was revived, and now there are 3 new locations out there for people to try out. This would make it one of the few on our list that has made a comeback and seems to be succeeding. Santiago. The Santiago, with its rising sun logo, was a Mexican fast food chain founded in Minnesota in 1969. When it was at its height of power, there were over 80 locations open and was right there beside KFC. Sadly, this chain would be neglected by its founders, as they would go out and open other restaurants. But for a time, it was even more popular than Taco Bell. However, Santiago would eventually be turned into Taco Bells, and we would lose some of the unique food items like the taco burrito and chilito. This chain would die in the late 80s, however. It would be revived in 1990s, and now there are 4 locations up and running. Royal Castle. The restaurant, Royal Castle, was first founded in 1938 in Miami, Florida. They were very similar to White Castle and White Tower burgers, as they also served hamburgers. However, one thing that set them apart was their signature birch beer, which was their version of root beer. They even had orange juice that was freshly squeezed with their breakfast. During its peak of popularity, it would sell hamburgers for 15 cents, which would be $1.50 today, and have over 175 locations around the United States. There is one left in Miami, but the rest were swallowed whole by the competition like McDonald's and Burger King. The founder blamed the new management for the failure, saying, if he had known the new owners would have such a disinterest in running a fast food chain, he would never have sold it to them. It was announced in 1976 that Royal Castle would be closing down for good. Showbiz Pizza Place. This fast food chain was made in 1980 when Robert L. Brock and the owners of ChiChi separated. This gives some context as to why so many of this restaurant's branding and offerings are so similar to the famous pizza-eating mouse, whose middle name is E for entertainment. This restaurant had an edge that a lot of others lacked, since it had arcade games and animatronic shows as well as coin-operated rides. At its peak, it had over 280 stores. The company was based in Texas, and for a time it thrived. However, when the stores began to struggle, it was forced to merge with Chuck E. Cheese in 1992, and they rebranded as Chuck E. Cheese. Only now Chuck E. Cheese would have animatronics and new elements that would see it stand the test of time. The last Showbiz would close in 1993. Lums. Florida, in the year 1956, would see the opening of the fast food chain, Lums. This family restaurant would be opened after the Perlmans purchased Lums' hot dog stand and decided it would be a great idea for a chain of restaurants. They would expand over the years and would have over 500 locations at its height of power. They were known for steaming their hot dogs in beer, which made it a unique and popular food item. They had a rustic but welcoming restaurant where anyone was welcome to dine and meet up for a filling meal. They were successful until the 1970s, when they changed owners and were sold to a Swiss holding company. However, the Swiss holding company that purchased it saw all the locations close down within only a couple of years, all but gone by the 90s. Only one location remained in 2009, which shut down after 32 years. Farrell's Ice Cream Parlor. This chain of ice cream and sandwiches was first opened in Oregon in the early 1960s. This charming, family-friendly restaurant had over 120 locations at its height and was known for offering them a free ice cream sundae on a child's birthday. The early 1900 decor was charming, and today, Farrell's is a restaurant most remembered for the boat hats the employees were forced to wear. However, others may remember this restaurant's name for the tragic events of their Sacramento location in 1972. The Sacramento location of this restaurant suffered a tragedy when a private jet failed to take off from California's executive airport and crashed into the ice cream parlor, killing 22 people. While people have tried to reopen them since its decline and closure, none were successful. Kenny Rogers Roasters. The Kenny Rogers Roasters restaurant was a chicken-centered fast food chain that was opened by the musician Kenny Rogers and whose headquarters was based in Malaysia in 1981. This menu had items like rotisserie chicken, mac and cheese, and cornbread. They focused on being healthier than fried food and had a warm country feel. This was viewed as a healthier and more wholesome place that meant you cared about your family's health. It was very popular in its first years and had a lot of expansion, but the competition in the United States was too fierce to survive. This chain is still thriving in Asia, with over 150 locations up and running. Sadly, if one wants to try out a delicious plate of flavorful chicken from this restaurant, they will need to head over to Malaysia, Singapore, China, Indonesia, Cambodia, Brunei, or the Philippines. These defunct American restaurants have all but disappeared from the newer generation's minds by now, but there are still some of us who miss those old times. Their special memories are still alive in the hearts of many. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, please let us know by subscribing and sharing with friends. Leave a comment below about your favorite discontinued fast food restaurants. Turn on notifications for more delicious updates.